Hey guys, I'm Jeremy, and here's my trip to Syria on bicycle just before the Civil War started. So, luckily I didn't get kidnapped or bombed or anything, but I did have one of the biggest coincidences of almost any of my travels along the way. And it was nice to head there because obviously it's not super touristy. You know, the war in Iraq was raging on nearby for several years already, and it just didn't really get that many people, but it's an amazing place. When most people think of the Roman Empire, you know, you're thinking more Italy and stuff, but obviously all of the whole Middle East, especially on that coast, where a lot of the old architecture and stuff is. So, super interesting spot. But unfortunately, I don't think too many people are going there now because there's still some ongoing conflicts. So I was really lucky to check it out then because obviously after I left the next year, the Civil War started, and that's been going on since pretty much. The last couple years have had a ceasefire, but it's still not the safest place in the world. So I was really lucky to see such an amazing country. So I started this trip in Armenia and went through Georgia and Turkey into Kurdistan, Iraq, and then back into Turkey. And so I guess I was near Gaziantep and headed to the border. And I heard a few conflicting things, like I read in Lonely Planet that, you know, I had to apply in my home country so I wouldn't even be able to get in. I heard other people saying I might be able to get it at the border. So I was pretty nervous that, like, you know, I wouldn't even be able to go technically. And I also heard it was probably going to be about $130 for a visa, and it would also, you know, take hours and hours to get it approved. So I headed down towards the border, and the part about it taking all day was true. I think it took about 8 or 9 hours. I just kind of waited there all day. You know, there was a few tourists that trickled through from, you know, whatever countries, but pretty dead. And then in the evening, I got it approved, and actually it was only like $17 for a 2-week visa. The only bad thing is like I'm entering Syria at nighttime. You know, this was already the end of November, and they were having a holiday. I'm not sure what holiday is then because it's not Ramadan, but I know they're off for a few days, which is another reason why I wanted to get in on, like, I guess it was that Friday or something, or even that Thursday, because like for about a week there was nothing open. And so when I even headed into that first village, I was looking for a hotel, and the hotels didn't even want to take me really because it was a holiday at that time, the next day. So I ended up just camping in some random olive field, basically. And I woke up in the morning, I heard some guy, you know, saying something. And I opened the tent, looked at the guy, and, you know, he's a really friendly, kind of jolly guy. And, you know, we communicated as much as we could, and he, you know, set out a mat, and, you know, we had some tea and some breakfast. I think the one girl I saw was one of his wives. I think he had like 3 or 4 or something like that. So pretty lucky guy. Or maybe you're not so lucky. Maybe one's enough. But anyway, I took off from there and headed over towards Allepo, which was only at like 44 kilometers. So on the road to Allepo, it was pretty flat. Not too much going on because it was a holiday. There's a few other couch surfers and travelers there I met up with, and we got to explore the city a bit. It's pretty cool. They have some old castles from, you know, way back in the day, and also these souks, which are basically the underground markets. And that makes sense, right? Because it's in the Middle East there. It could get super hot. So underground, it's usually 60 degrees all year round, right? So those were really cool to check out. And then we go to some hookah bars and whatnot. And it was kind of funny because we did go into one mosque, and the girls came with us, but they had to wear like a kind of uniform, which looks kind of like a witch. It was really funny. They had to dress up kind of what looked like a witch. It was funny, another night I went out in Allepo, I met up with another couch surfer, this girl Victoria and her friend, and this British guy Rob. And we hung out there, we played pool and stuff like that. And I guess later they're going to have a little get together, and I don't know, I think there was like 2 guys and like 8 girls going or something like that. So, I mean, no one should be worried about the ratio, at least on the guy's end, right? And it's funny because I went out to get in the cab, and the guy literally, when I was about to get in, just took off. So that dude Rob gets like the douchebag award of not just the year, of like the decade. But anyway, it was a good time. hanging out in Allepo for a few days, and then I cruised over to the coast. And the people there were dressed even more in like Western clothes. Like I could have been in like Italy or something. You wouldn't even really known any difference. And I assume this is because, like, you know, coastal towns are exposed to trade from all different places. So in the interior of the country, in the mountains or in a desert, you're more isolated and probably more conservative with your views and stuff like that. Where on the coast, you're exposed to tons of different cultures, religions, and things like that. So I would say even around the world, in most places, you know, like even if I thought of China, right? Shanghai's on the coast, or Beijing, and maybe in the mountains it's more traditional. And even in the States, right? The West Coast or the Northeast Coast is quite, I guess you'd say, more liberal, and maybe the center of the country is more conservative. So anyway, hung out in Latakia for a couple days, which was nice. And I even met up with a girl through couch surfing, went and had, you know, some drinks at a bar, listened to music. It was really, like I said, just like being in any Western country there for the most part. And I also met up with some couch surfers in Latakia, which was cool because, you know, you travel by bicycle by yourself for a while. And then if you could meet up with some people you already met traveling with and stuff, obviously it's a lot more fun than me just sitting alone or whatever. Anyway, so I took off from Latakia and headed down. In a couple areas, you'd see some of the Bedouins. One family took me in for the evening, and I could have even stayed there a couple more days, but, you know, I was just trying to, you know, keep going. Tartus seemed like a pretty nice town. I think I would have even liked that more than Latakia in some ways. But I wanted to, you know, keep heading down towards Lebanon and then back into Syria. And I got into Lebanon, which I was only there for a few days. I stopped in Tripoli, I guess, the first night, and I stayed at a Christian guy's hotel. And he was definitely expressing some frustration being, you know, basically a minority in a Muslim majority area. And I don't think he was too into Islam, so it did seem quite frustrating for him. And then I cruised into Beirut, which Beirut's like, I don't know, like a Hong Kong or a Shanghai or a New York. You know, they call it the Paris of the Middle East, basically. So super posh, expensive. You know, you'd walk down the street, a lot of people aren't even speaking Arabic. They might be speaking English or French. So definitely a neat place to check out, but a little expensive. I'd actually met up with some Americans and people there and checked out, like, they've got an American university and stuff. And then I headed up over the mountains and then back into Syria. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the multi-entry visa, so I had to apply for another one, which I hope would be fast, but it took several hours or most of the day. And so I was sitting there waiting, and there was a couple other Americans there, and, you know, we were talking for a while, and, you know, eventually guys, like, for whatever reason, we mentioned, like, oh, I hiked the Appalachian Trail, and it's like, oh, I hiked the Appalachian Trail too. It was like, when? I was like, 2002? I was like, oh my God, I did it in 2002 also. So this was 2009, so this was, you know, we did it 7 years earlier. And so I was like, what's your trail name? Because on the trail, we don't use our regular names. It's not like, oh, do you know Mike from Boston or Jeremy from Buffalo or Ted from, you know, Oregon? It's like, you wouldn't remember everyone's name. So everyone has like a funny name that they acquired either through something funny or weird that happened on the trail, or they made up the name or whatever. So I was Pig Chicken and he was Dropout. And I was like, oh my God, I think I did meet you. And I actually met him in Maine. I think what he did, why he was Dropout, is because I think one of his family members had gotten sick or something like that. And so he maybe had started north and dropped out somewhere like in Virginia or something. And I didn't meet him on that part. But he had, a couple months later or whatever, he had started back in Maine and was going south. And so I definitely met him for one night. And I remember talking to him for quite a while because he was a teacher. And at that point, I was considering being a teacher because, of course, I wanted the vacation time and stuff like that. You know, I realized that there's not a lot of great things about being a teacher. There's probably only 3 good things: June, July, and August. So it was one of the reasons why I later became a teacher, which is what I did. We're gone. So it wasn't just a coincidence that I met him on the trail, and he partially inspired me to be a teacher later on. But we were also headed to Damascus, Syria that day. And on the Appalachian Trail, one of the most famous towns is Damascus, Virginia. It's about a quarter of the way on the trail if you're going northbound. And it's also where they have trail days, which is like a huge reunion for all the people who have hiked before or are hiking that year, meet up there around the 3rd week of May. So what a coincidence that we met on a trail. One of the most famous towns is Damascus, and then I see him in Syria at the border, and I met him before. We were going to Damascus, so I actually ended up meeting up with him and a few other Americans a couple nights later at a nice restaurant there. So I didn't spend too much time in Damascus. It's basically, you know, it's similar to Allepo. It was funny, I did walk into one market and a guy, you know, comes out to shake my hand, like looking real sincere and friendly, and he's like, oh, sit down and have some tea. And I knew it was, he's gonna sell me something, right? And it would probably be outrageous. And it was, you know, he's real nice. He's like, I have this bracelet here for $135. And I'm like, dude, I wouldn't spend more than $1 on that. And actually, that's what I offered. I usually, instead of like negotiating with people, like one of the best techniques you do is actually just start at like $1 for anything, or like 50 cents. And then people get so mad, it's so funny. So obviously, yeah, I wasn't gonna buy anything from that dude. And then, yeah, it was only 2 or 3 more days until I got to the border of Jordan. And in Jordan, I checked out Petra, of course, because that's one of the main sites. And of course, Jordan's more touristy, so there's a lot more like kind of obnoxious kids and things like that, because they have a lot of tourists giving them money and pens and whatever. So that was a little annoying. And then after that, I went through Israel and ended that trip in Cairo. I actually biked from Cairo out to the pyramids, and on the way I saw a lady get hit by a car and go across the lane, like right next to where I was biking. It was pretty insane. It looked like she was gonna live, but yeah, definitely not her best day. So yeah, the Middle East was pretty cool. I think the place I liked the most was Kurdistan, Iraq, and then Syria. A lot of that just because they don't really have that many tourists, and there was cool mountains in the Iraqi part that I was in, and then Syria was just cool, like a lot of neat sights and friendly people. Of course, the food is great there, although I think by the end of it, I was getting a little tired of, like, you know, shawarma or hummus or whatever I was eating like day after day. I know Egypt had a few other different things, so that was kind of a breath of fresh air for a bit. And then after that trip, I flew down to Nairobi, and I biked Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda, so I'll make a video about that soon too. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed my video about Syria, and I'll see you guys soon. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more content. My channel has a lot of different stuff from my travels around the world, whether hiking or biking, and some of the things over the years I've done, whether I was in the military, commercial fishing in Alaska, or my experience living in China and Taiwan for 15 years, and I was a teacher there and led tours and did all kinds of stuff. So if that stuff's beneficial for you or entertaining, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.